All right, howdy folks and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about, is Texas A&M mediocre as a football program? This is something that you often hear from people. I don't think it's from people that really love college football as a whole. But I'm just going to approach this from an angle not necessarily of being a Texas A&M supporter or a fan, but just from a perspective of numbers. I personally take the view that the richness of college football is all of its programs. So that's just how I view things, starting out. But I think there's people that just want to trash talk and make digs at and pick on Texas A&M for whatever reason, and that's fine. It's just when you get into the numbers, if they want to talk numbers, then it's a little bit different. So that's just the perspective that I'm going to take on this. So is Texas A&M mediocre? Well, I think we can. What does mediocre mean? I guess everyone might have a different definition of what mediocre means. And this dark reader, there we go. Mediocre means of only moderate quality, so not very good. I guess, what does moderate mean? A word that dances on the edge, not too wild, not too tame. So it's balanced. Basically, it's like not too high, not too low, kind of middle of the road. So A&M is mediocre or middle of the road. I guess it's kind of what people say. So let's take a look. So how many programs are there? Well, according to Wikipedia, there's 124 programs roughly in, I guess, FBS college football. So middle of the road might be 62. So if A&M ranks about 62nd in a lot of areas, then A&M being mediocre or middle would be about accurate. So let's take a look at the first categories. The first category is conference championships. So this is the top 25 right here. So you can see A&M is sitting at number 24 with 18. Below them is Arizona State with 17. We have a couple more 18s with Minnesota and TCU. Then we get into 20 with San Diego State and Boise State. Now, San Diego State being in the conference that they are, I forget what conference they're in. But anyway, they have 20 titles there. Let me get into UMass. UMass has 22 conference titles. So let me look at Troy and Appalachian State. So let's just look at these three. I think Boise's, has been at least historically, been a top program at times. I'm not so sure about San Diego State, but let's look at UMass, Troy, and Appalachian State. Troy and UMass, and I think App State as well. They do have 22 conference titles apiece. Do we want to make the conversion of like how many Power 5 conference titles are worth are worth one G5 conference title? I think you could make that conversion. We have North Texas up here with 25. conference titles. So, you know, how can North Texas be number 12-ish all time in conference titles? And be, you know, a bottom tier program, I guess. So let's not make the conversion for the sake of this, for this observation. But let's keep it in mind, you know, Tulsa having more conference titles than Alabama here, does that give Tulsa more prestige than Alabama? Well, no, because Tulsa competes at a different level than Alabama. I think we can make that distinction, but I don't want to do the math right now because I wouldn't know where to begin. Let's just take it at face value. Texas A&M is number 18 in conference championships. So A&M in conference is number 18, which is significantly above 64, which is about where mediocre would be. And you can see A&M here is number 22, I guess. Yeah, they're number 22 overall with 18. And teams under Texas A&M, we have LSU with 16. That's I think that's noteworthy. Got Tennessee, 16. Florida State with 15. Georgia with 15. Stanford 15. Wisconsin 14. Oregon 13. Virginia Tech 11. Oklahoma State 10. Florida with 8. So just looking at these conference title numbers, just numbers wise with comparable programs, you know, let's not compare A&M to North Texas or Tulsa for now, but let's, you know, A&M's been in a Power 5 conference for most of its existence, or what ended up being Power 5. So we can compare the Southwest with, you know, what was at the time the Pac-10 and the SEC. I think that's fair. So A&M has more conference titles than Georgia, for example, and the other teams that we just looked at. So is A&M mediocre in conference titles? Well, the numbers historically say no. Now, before we move on to the next category, I think one of the reasons why people often say A&M is mediocre, if they're actually trying to, you know, be good faith about it, I think it's because A&M has largely been mediocre for the past, you know, about 10 or 20 years actually. A&M fires R.C. Slocum in 2002 and hires Coach Fran, and Coach Fran never panned out. And then they hired Mike Sherman. We had a couple of 9-win seasons there, but for the most part, it was pretty bad. It was usually either, you know, middle of the road or, you know, sub 500, with 9 wins being a highlight, you know. So for the most part, A&M has been just about mediocre for a large part of 20 years now. So people that are about 20 years old, that's kind of all they've seen. You know, if they don't go back and dig and see that, if we look at all of A&M history, their peak is really in the 80s and 90s. That's when they were ranked the highest most consistently. That's when they had the most double-digit win seasons. From 85 to about 93, there were 6 conference titles, plus one in 94 that was not awarded because they were not eligible. So they didn't have that title, but they had the performance for it, and then they win they go to 2 conference title games, 97, 98, and they take 98. So from 85 to about 98, there's about 7.5, we'll call it, conference titles. And so that was kind of A&M's peak. And then that dominance, whatever they had going for them in the Southwest Conference, that ended. And that coupled with whatever was going on with their administration and R.C. Slocum and the whole facilities arms race, and I think personally firing R.C. Slocum prematurely, all that kind of helped derail whatever momentum A&M had coming out of the 80s and 90s. So I think that's kind of the whole backdrop that people have in their minds. So let's look at all-time record. So their all-time winning percentage is 604, and that is ranked number 23. So A&M in winning percentage is number 23, which is above 64. So A&M is not mediocre there. And so there's, the usual suspects up here that are going to be at the top: Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, those kind of programs. Let's see who's below Texas A&M. And we get into 500 here pretty quick, to be honest. Virginia Tech, Michigan State, Miami, Wisconsin, Oregon. Let's see who else. Got Ole Miss. TCU, meh. We got Oklahoma State here. Who else? Baylor. A lot of these aren't, really strong programs. Yeah, we're kind of getting down to the weeds here. There's no really strong programs that are down here. But the point is, A&M is number 23 in all-time win percentage. And that's with a minimum of 100 games. So Georgia Southern is above A&M with 623. Again, do we want to make that conversion right now from Power 5 to G5? No, but we'll just take it at face value. Coastal Carolina, App State. For the most part, these other programs are all strong. And we don't need to make the conversion for them. A&M sits down here, still in the top 20-ish, at number 23, I think it was. So is A&M mediocre in win percentage all time? Not according to this. Took it national championships. Claimed. This is something that I made a video about before. Championships claimed. This is a big mess as far as what's a legitimate claim. What do you do with split years? Basically there's a lot of threes, and A&M is number 20 still. So a lot of these aren't recent, like I said in my other video about national championships, but the point is, if we just take these numbers at face value, A&M is number 20 in national titles, which is still above 64. And you can tell here Look at all these zeros. In this category especially, national titles, the majority of college football doesn't have and will probably never have any of these. Even teams that go back a long time, like Rice or different programs like that. So you don't start seeing any sort of national title in history until you reach UCLA, which is ranked number 32. So this is kind of a weird statistic to measure because most of these titles are at the top. It's going to be Alabama, Michigan, Notre Dame, USC, and those speak for themselves. So as far as just pure national championships claimed and recognized, A&M sits at, I guess, number 20. So not mediocre there. We already looked at conference titles. Looks like at bowl games. Well, there's A&M with 42 bowl games. And they sit at number 18. So as far as bowls, they're number 18, which is still above 64. And it's not going to be the same. We've got 130 here, but the point is that it's about 60 would be technically what mediocre means, or middling, or moderate, I guess. A&M sits at 18 with 42. That's just bowl games gone to, so that's 42 years of a bowl game. Let's go to all-time wins. Now this is a little bit hard to measure because this is all wins throughout their whole history. So this would be regardless of how long they've existed. So some programs have been around longer than others. Even with that, A&M sits there at 778. So all-time wins, A&M sits at number 16, which is still above 64. And they have 778, and they are above programs like VTech, Florida, Oregon, Cal, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Baylor, those kind of programs. South Carolina, even Florida State somehow. But again, this is all-time wins, so the longer you've been around, the higher you're going to be in this category, and A&M is probably on the older side, so they do have an edge there, just on history. But all-time wins, they sit at 778. Now bowl record, so there's 40 some odd bowls for Texas A&M. So let's see how many bowl wins they have. I don't see them on this list, or at least this graph up here. We're gonna find them. Okay. So as far as bowl winning percentage, A&M sits at 476, which is number 54 out of 130-ish, I guess. So bowl wins, they sit at, was it 54? 54, which is still above 64, but not that much. So, and seeing that it's below 500, I think it's fair to call Texas A&M, at least in their bowl record, you know, pretty mediocre there. You know, 4.76. That means you're losing more than you're winning. But again, this is throughout history, so keep that in mind. So that one's pretty close to being middle of the road. Let's look at consensus All-Americans. A&M sits there at 33. Notre Dame kind of beats everyone with 107. So A&M in All-Americans sits at number 21 with 33, which is, I'd say, pretty well above 64. A&M is above programs like Wisconsin, Auburn, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Kentucky, Texas Tech, Oregon. And then you start getting out into the weeds here, South Carolina, those teams. Number 21 there in All-Americans. Heisman winners. This is typically pretty hard to get. A&M has 2 of those. So they sit at number 12. Which I would say is well above 64. They're above programs like Wisconsin, Baylor, BC, Houston, Iowa. What else is there? Oklahoma State. Just below Texas. Well, I guess equal to Texas. This is a little similar to national championships. The vast majority of programs have 0. So I think people kind of overlook this a little bit. Just, you know, in different categories, how many programs sit at 0 in different things. Let's look at NFL draft picks. There's A&M with 302. Notre Dame has a bunch. A&M sits at 18. Which I would say is well above half, 64. Number 18. Let's look at first round draft picks. There's A&M with 36. So NFL number 1s, A&M sits at number 16, which I would say is well above 64. 36. And they're above programs like UCLA, Nebraska, Auburn, Wisconsin, Washington, Cal, Pitt, and Arizona State. That's another category. So this stuff like this is not directly tied to like wins and championships, but you know, it is part of the success of your program because whether we like it or not, college football does serve as the minor league to the NFL. So a good program is going to, you know, show success in that area as well. And there you see A&M at number 16 all time. Weeks in poll. There's A&M at 489. So I'm guessing this is how many times they've been, I guess, in the top 25, I would assume. So A&M is there at number 19, which I would say is above 64. 489, and they're above teams like Washington, Michigan State, Oregon, Ole Miss, Oklahoma State, kind of some of the similar names we heard before. Not a lot of huge names down here. So we got that. Weeks at number 1. This is still how many weeks they were ranked at number 1. A&M is at 6 weeks, I think. Yeah. And we're number 28. So at least out of the top 25 in that category, but still, I would say, still above 64. Again, a lot of these programs are going to be at 0. And understandably so. I mean, Western Michigan and UTSA and UTEP probably won't see number 1 anytime soon, if ever. So that's all the categories that we have here. So out of all the categories, I see that they were only out of the top 25, I think once or twice. So they're number 28, number 1 in the polls. They were ranked number 28. And then bowl win percentage, which is it's a pretty important stat. They were ranked number 54. So that one I would say is pretty important because college football is all about the bowls as well. So 54 is pretty close to 64. So in that category, A&M is pretty close to, you know, being middle of the road. So I guess, like, if I would see these numbers and someone asked me to say, you know, if they asked me, you know, is this program middle of the road? Is it mediocre? The only thing I could say is that, you know, besides these, really it's mostly just bowl wins where A&M is pretty middle of the road. But they're number 18 in bowl trips. So, you know, that's, we have R.C. Slocum to thank for the bowl trips and Jackie Sherrill. Well, we have R.C. Slocum to thank for all the bowl losses. So, but I mean, you know, bowl trips and bowl wins, you know, if you have to be, at least A&M is number 18 in bowl wins. Or sorry, bowl trips. But the only thing that I could say really to this is that, well, like, sure, A&M is above middle in a lot of these categories, but, you know, being above, you know, Rice and UCF and Kansas and Hawaii, is that really a feat? You know, we really know that the majority of college football, happens, you know, basically in this section of the rankings. Anything past this first column is, you know, second rate, I guess someone might say. And I could understand that. Even with that, though, A&M is still above 30, or still above 20 in a lot of these categories. So if we look at, let's see. we look at Texas, where was that? So here's Texas A&M all-time. I guess I could have done this at the beginning. So 23rd all-time record, 20th in national championships claimed, 22nd in conference titles, and 42nd or 18th in bowl trips. So you can see, I guess, these little meters here, and that's kind of if you could fit all of college football into this one little meter. I guess I can zoom in a little bit to visualize this. Where did that thing go? That's weird. Yeah, this will help here. So, if you could fit all of college football into this little shape right here, this is where A&M sits numerically all time in these categories. And it looks like, to me, it's top 20-ish. That's just what the numbers say, all time. And so, for sure, A&M's history over the past 20 years has been, had a couple highlights here and there. I'm kind of skeptical now that Jimbo's gone. And that's just me personally. I wasn't ready to see Jimbo go, but that's a separate issue. Is A&M mediocre? I mean, I don't think you can call these numbers mediocre. They're not the best. If A&M just seems to be a top 25 program all time. Now, are they a top 25 right now? Are they recently top 25? Over the past 20 years as a whole, no. But all time, I think historically the numbers show that A&M is not mediocre. And this isn't an emotional thing, it's just, what do the numbers say? I wouldn't call any other team with these numbers mediocre. I would just say that they're in the better half of college football. It looks to be like they're in the better quarter of college football, which is where most of the high-level competition takes place. So A&M is, fighting to stay in that quarter. So I think that's true. But is A&M mediocre? I don't think you can say it, if all you care about are national titles, then they only have 3 that are claimed. And if you want to go through and say, well, national titles before 1950 or before 1960 are no good, it's like, I would kind of halfway agree, actually. But then you'd have to do that for every other team, and we'll see how the whole national title thing stacks up after that. I think you do that to A&M, you do that to a lot of other programs as well, or at least some of them, not all of them. But I mean, I think most of this just stems from just picking on A&M, which I get it. People like to do that, and that's fine. But we don't pick our teams because we don't select our teams just because of winning. If that were the case, everyone would be an Oklahoma fan or a Alabama fan or Notre Dame fan or whatever. this stuff actually it means something to people beyond just beyond, you know, winning football games. Although it is nice to win games. That's for sure. But I think that's about all I had. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one.